Oh my God, it's Lex Luthor. He's in the studio.
Bald! Bald!
It's a bird. It's a plane. Wait, no. It's just another nerd talking about movies on YouTube. We're going to be doing a full spoiler review of James Gunn's Superman in this video. So if you have not seen the movie in its entirety, or if you're a person incredibly unlike me that will watch a spoiler review without watching it, that's fine too. But just be aware, I'm going to dig into the nitty-gritty details of what goes on in this movie in this video. The new Superman is everything I needed it to be, and I think everything DC needs it to be in order to build on this new DC cinematic universe. And I know there's a lot of criticism when I say that, hey, can't we just have an isolated story, a good movie that stands on its own without worrying about a franchise? And I agree with you, but no, I mean, that's not what this conversation's about. We all knew it was highly publicized in advance that this was going to be the start of something big, hopefully, that James Gunn was brought in to do something approximate with DC that happened with the MCU. And that's where I'm judging this from. A huge part of how I'm grading this movie is the promise of the future enough? Does he succeed in making something that they can build on? And I think he does. It makes some interesting choices, this movie, with the narrative structure and the character focus. And I think that your mileage will vary on some of those choices. But overall, this is a crowd-pleasing blockbuster that I think most people are going to enjoy. I saw it with a crowd of about 200 people. There was a lot of cheers, a lot of clapping, and I haven't seen that in the theater in a while. Tonally, I think it's a breath of fresh air for Superman. James Gunn tries to strike a balance between the classic comic book silliness of Richard Donner's Superman and the kind of Batman and Batman wannabes of what Nolan and Snyder did with early DC stuff. You know, the dark, the gritty, the realism. Like, why are you making it real, dude? He's pretending to be a bat. Those movies are great, but I think when it came to Superman, we lost a lot of the core values and the bright fun of what that franchise is supposed to be. The Christopher Reeve Superman, he spent as much time saving cats from trees and other random strangers from small incidents as he did saving the entire world. And we definitely lost that with what Snyder was doing. But I think James Gunn is aware that the current audience is cynical and is going to reject that if you lean too far into that. So while this movie is very silly, I think he balances it really well and largely succeeds in trying to do both of those things. It's really funny, like all of James Gunn's movies. And I know this because, again, I saw it with a crowd of 200 people and they were all laughing a lot. A lot of people in my initial review on TikTok were like, it's not funny, you're dumb. And I'm like, well, there was a lot of dumb people laughing in my theater. I feel like a lot of people were really skeptical of Crypto the dog and how that was going to work being incorporated into the live action iteration. And people love dogs. I don't know if you knew this. So they worked very well. All of those moments landed. There was a guy next to me that every time Crypto did anything, he went, "Aw," which, hey man, live your dream. At the end of the movie, when Crypto turns Lex Luthor into this giant chew toy, the crowd was jubilant, and I was with them. One of the big sticking points for a lot of people seems to be that the movie starts in medias res. It's in the middle of the action. Kal-El has been on Earth for a long time. He's been Superman for years. Lois already knows his secret identity. They're already romantically involved, and he's not alone. There's a whole host of other metahumans on the planet with him. And it's in James Gunn fashion, some of the more obscure characters from the canon. And I know comic book fans are going to be like, they're not obscure, dude. And I just mean, like, if you ask 100,000 people who Mr. Terrific or Metamorpho is, 99,998 are going to be like, huh? And that's James Gunn's move. He likes to, he's a real comic book fan and he's pulling those characters. I mean, it's what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot of those characters were nobodies as far as most people were concerned. And now they're some of the most popular characters in Marvel thanks to those movies. So I feel like he did that again here. And I may be in the minority here, but I like this choice that it starts in the middle of the action, especially after watching all of the other Superman movies in the past week leading up to this film. I do not need to see the destruction of Krypton. Thank God I didn't have to watch Marlon Brando again, though Bradley Cooper as Jor-El was a choice. And I don't need to see Ma and Pa Kent pulling a baby from a crater and being like finders keepers. We know the origin of Superman. And this movie is not an origin story. I've seen other criticisms that, hey, I don't need an origin story, but I do need some build up for these characters, some emotional investment. That's totally fair. But everything that they did here worked for me. I think that there is a core character arc for Clark Kent, for Superman, that is effective. And we'll get into that here shortly. I think one of the biggest, most valid criticisms of the DCEU that was started back with Snyder and the gang is that it got moving too quickly. It never took the time that the MCU took with phase 1 to establish these characters individually before bringing them together. For some reason, this, well, we're here now approach that James Gunn is taking works for me. I don't have that same criticism, even though maybe I should. I feel like I'm living in this established universe and I'm ready to go. James Gunn has recently come out and said that this version of the DCU is closer in approximation to something like Star Wars as far as a franchise than the MCU. And I think by that he means that he plans on doing a bunch of isolated and loosely interconnected stories that take place in the recognizably same universe rather than this attempt at this episodic version of storytelling that the different phases of the MCU used. You know what I mean? And I like that idea. I think that it frees him to explore different parts of this universe without, oh, this movie connects to this movie, which connects to this show, and nobody gives a fuck anymore. He's not going to get bogged down in that play-by-play continuity. The best thing that this movie offers, I think, is the cast. David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan are stellar versions of Lois and Clark. The entire supporting cast, from Jimmy Olsen to Lex Luthor, are dripping with chemistry and charisma. I do think we could have used more time with Lois and Clark themselves. Maybe we didn't need another origin story, but I would have liked to have seen these versions of these characters meet and grow to love one another. But they do so well with the sparse romantic material that they're given. I was really grateful that we didn't get a third iteration of Lois Lane being a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who paradoxically doesn't know how to spell any words. That joke can only work so many times. Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl and Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific were crowd favorites at my screening, and deservedly so. Mr. Terrific probably has the best fight scene in the film when he's shielding Lois outside the Pocket Universe when Clark Kent is captive. We don't get much of the Justice Gang outside of Mr. Terrific. It's just classic Nathan Fillion quips and Isabella Merced flying around screaming as Hawkgirl. But it's enough of a promise for the future for me. I loved when Hawkgirl murdered that guy and she's like, I'm not a bitch like Superman or whatever she says, right? Like, and I think that that's James Gunn telling the audience that this Superman has a code. He has a moral integrity that's true to the core comic book character, but this universe will have some edge, some bite. And that bite is apparently crypto. There's a lot going on in this movie, and I think a lot of people will argue that there's too much going on, and that's totally fair. But again, I think there is a very simple core character arc for Clark Kent. I hear a lot of chatter online, especially from the Snyder Bros, and I like the Snyder movies. Man of Steel's good. That this version of Superman, this iteration, is far too weak. He's not an alpha. And I think it's important to see our protagonist struggle. You know, it's interesting to see conflict that's external as well as internal, but it also makes perfect sense. If you remember, if you've seen the entire movie, he's fighting himself. It's a clone of Superman that he's fighting. So I'm not sure how you can watch the whole movie and then still wonder how he got his ass kicked. It's also a good metaphor, I think, maybe a bit on the nose, but he spends the film rocked by this realization that his parents, his idols, sent him there for a purpose at odds with his core beliefs. Does that make him a bad person? Does that undo his goals, shatter his sense of identity? The very last scene of this film is such a good ending. You get one final belly laugh from the brilliant Alan Tudyk, and then the tears flow from a very simple bookend and the credits roll. Gary says, like at the beginning, that it comforts Kal-El to see his parents, but instead of Bradley Cooper's Jor-El, it's Ma and Pa Kent, and we get all these home videos displayed in this rotunda. And I don't know who is filming those scenes. I don't think they had drones in 1990s Kansas or whatever, but I was crying my eyes out. It's a really good character arc for Clark Kent. It's his literal found family, the true source of his morals and outlook. I cried like baby Kal-El. I'm not sure what to make of Jimmy Olsen and the whole PIMP thing. I'm not a huge fan of the comics. I don't know if that's canon, that he pulls hella ass and he's being pursued by every attractive woman in Metropolis. But I'll be honest, it made me chuckle. We only get the tiniest glimpse of Millie Alcock as Supergirl, and more honesty here, I don't know much about that character. I didn't watch that show. And again, I don't read the comics, but I loved whatever it is that she's doing. I don't know if she's supposed to be, this sassy lady with a slight drinking problem. I don't know if that's canon, but I really liked it. I think it's funny. I can't wait to see more of her when she gets her movie. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, I think, was incredible. You can tell by his interviews on his press tour that he's a legitimate fan of the comics, or at least he's done his research. So him in conjunction with James Gunn, who's definitely a fan, they're producing this awesome Division I hater that we all know Lex Luthor to be. And, the story of an immigrant, a literal alien, fighting a billionaire has always been compelling. And I think Nicholas Hoult has leaned into this awesome aspect of his character as a villain where he's just like, he's an evil dude. I think he fits really well into the zaniness of James Gunn's vibe, but also there's some gravitas to what he's doing because it's Nicholas Hoult and he's incredible. So I can't wait to see more of him. All in all, I think, even if you don't vibe all of the way with James Gunn's style or the aesthetic of this film, because there's a lot of fair criticism that it doesn't always look that great. It's very CGI heavy and very stylistic in a digital way. That's totally fair. But I think you'll still likely be sold on these characters and seeing much more of them in the future, which is the main goal of this movie again. I really, really liked it. Comment down below what your favorite parts of the movie were or what your thoughts are, what your biggest criticisms are. Make sure to subscribe. Check out the podcast, streaming things available on all platforms. We're going to be doing a couple-hour deep dive on this film early next week. And we're also rewatching the entirety of Stranger Things. Speaking of streaming things, if you like Severance, that old show that's one of the biggest shows in the world, we had an exclusive interview. Well, I don't know if it's exclusive, but it's exclusive to us. She only talked to us that day, I'm pretty sure. Deechin Lockman, who played Miss Casey / Gemma on the show, was kind enough to stop by the studio and hang out with us for about an hour. That episode is live as you're watching this. So on iTunes or Spotify or even YouTube, if you want the video version, that interview is available. Check out Streaming Things. We like that you watched this. Thank you for watching it. Maybe that's the real punk rock.